But first, we begin with a ruling and a resignation in Fulton County, Georgia. On Friday, the judge overseeing the election interference case against former President Donald Trump ruled that District Attorney Fani Willis can remain on the case if Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade steps down. Within hours of that ruling, Wade submitted his resignation. Willis and Wade, you'll recall, have admitted to a past romantic relationship, but the pair deny any wrongdoing. In his ruling, the judge says there was not enough evidence of a conflict of interest, but he writes the relationship highlights a, quote, significant appearance of impropriety. CBS News correspondent Nikole Killion has more.
Fulton County Judge Scott McAfee gave District Attorney Fani Willis an ultimatum today. Either step aside from the 2020 election subversion case or have her former romantic partner, Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade, withdraw. Within hours, Wade tendered his resignation effective immediately to move this case forward. The former president hailed the move on Truth Social, calling Wade a disgrace.
He had to. There was no way that it was going to be the elected district attorney of Fulton County, Fani Willis, who was going to step down. After this decision came out,
the judge's ruling found Trump and the co-defendants that filed the complaint against Willis and Wade failed to prove a conflict of interest. There was no evidence, according to McAfee, that Willis financially benefited from her roughly year-long relationship with Wade, which included trips to the Caribbean and California. But the ruling did note a significant appearance of impropriety. McAfee was sharply critical of Willis's behavior, citing a lapse in judgment and calling her conduct during a hearing last month unprofessional.
Don't be cute with me and then think that you're not going to get an answer.
McAfee also said Willis and Wade's testimony didn't put concerns about their relationship to rest.
It wasn't kept secret, it was kept private.
And he invoked Southern playwright Tennessee Williams by writing, "An odor of mendacity remains."
From time to time, you see judges wax a bit poetic in their opinions. He could have just said, I think there was a lot of lying going on here, but instead he described it in more colorful terms.
The ruling comes after McAfee struck down 6 charges this week in the election interference case, including 3 involving the former president. Scott Grubman represented Kenneth Chesborough, who worked to overturn Georgia's election results and pleaded guilty last year.
It means the case goes from almost impossible going to trial before November to actually impossible to go to trial before November.
And Nikole joins me now from outside of the courthouse in Atlanta. So, Nikole, now that Nathan Wade has stepped down, what is next for Fani Willis and the election interference case?
Well, I think it remains to be seen. I mean, we did see a letter from her accepting the resignation of Nathan Wade. She praised him as an outstanding advocate and said that he was brave for taking on the Trump case, but we haven't really officially heard any type of official reaction from her specifically to the judge's ruling. So one would assume because Nathan Wade put forward his resignation that she intends to stay on the case because that was the decision that was posed to her by a judge. But when and how it moves forward is still up in the air because, again, you have some members of Trump's legal team, some of these other defendants, including Ashley Merchant, who was one of the attorneys who filed the initial complaint against Fani Willis and Nathan Wade, who say they're going to continue to fight this case and fight on behalf of their client. So does that mean they're going to appeal the judge's ruling? If so, that could possibly delay things in terms of the 2020 election interference case from moving forward, which is why you heard Grubman say there, you know, this may not go to trial if it goes to trial until after the November election.
All right, Nikole Killion, thank you. Let's bring in now CBS News investigative producer Dan Klaidman. He literally wrote the book on the case titled Find Me the Votes. Dan, take us behind the scenes in the district attorney's office. They had to have been preparing for this possibility. What have they done in anticipation, and how much will it potentially hurt them to have Nathan Wade step aside?
Yeah, look, they knew that, in fact, probably their best outcome here would be that Nathan Wade would go and Fani Willis would not be disqualified, get to stay, and get to continue overseeing the case. So this has been a long time coming. I think they have been thinking internally, how do they restructure the team? Nathan Wade's principal job was as the organizer of this massive, complicated case, and also someone who could sort of manage the lawyers. He was not ever going to be the sort of lead courtroom lawyer. We're now moving to the trial phase of this case. And so it's, I think, natural for someone else to emerge as the leader of the team. Who that is, we don't know yet. It could be someone who is presently on the team. It could be someone else in the DA's office. And it's also possible that they'll bring in someone from the outside again. And so we'll just have to wait and see. But I don't think it's a significant setback in terms of the structure of the team and the personalities and the players.
So they should, in terms of practice, be able to move forward. But what about appearance? Because District Attorney Fani Willis is up for re-election in the fall. It's likely that this case is not resolved by then. You're talking about moving into the trial phase. And there are still sort of these feelings of impropriety that hang over her office.
Absolutely. And that's something that does not dissipate easily or fade quickly. That's something that's going to take some time. I mean, the judge said that there was an odor of mendacity hanging over this case. He was extremely harsh in some of the things he said about Fani Willis, about her unprofessional testimony in the courtroom. So I think that the way Fani Willis is going to deal with this is, I think she's going to rehabilitate her reputation inside the courtroom. She is probably the best trial lawyer in the district attorney's office, period. She is actually the only one who has done, multiple RICO cases, complex felonies, long trials. And so my prediction, it's more than a prediction because I've spoken to friends of hers and I've spoken to people inside the DA's office, is that when this case goes to trial, you're going to see a lot of Fani Willis. She is going to be a significant player. You might see her doing the opening arguments in the case. You might see her even cross-examining a witness or two. So I think the best way for her to deal with those appearance issues is for her to do two things, really. Not to make any more mistakes and unforced errors, as this certainly was, and to do her work inside the courtroom, which, by the way, will be televised, so the whole world can see how well prepared she is for this case and what a professional she is.
Well, as much as people were watching this court case and her testimony on the stand, even more likely to tune in when the case actually gets underway.
Absolutely.
Real quick, though, is there a possibility that Trump and his co-defendants appeal the judge's decision?
There is, but there are multiple steps here. The first thing they have to do is get permission from the trial judge, Judge McAfee. He has to sign on to something called a certification of review to let them then appeal. Then they'd have to petition the Court of Appeals, and then they'd have to decide whether to take the appeal or not. I was interested to see that Ashley Merchant, the lawyer who filed the original motion on behalf of Michael Roman, in her statement, she did not say anything about potentially appealing this case. One other thing quickly, in previous orders, Judge McAfee has explicitly said, you have permission to appeal my ruling, or at least to ask for that certification of review. He was silent on that in this case. So I think there's a possibility that either they won't appeal at all or try to appeal, or if they do, they won't get his permission to go forward.
All right, Dan Klaidman, thank you.
Thanks, Lana.
And here in New York, former President Donald Trump's hush money trial has been postponed at least 30 days until mid-April. Judge Juan Merchan said that there are significant questions that must be resolved before the trial can begin. Prosecutors supported the trial being delayed by up to 30 days, but Trump's legal team requested a 90-day delay. In this case, the former president is accused of falsifying business records related to a payment made to adult film star Stormy Daniels during his 2016 presidential campaign.